Hi, so another week and another new build on the Legion Alpha. Not a great deal of changes. There's been some tuning, something's been tuned up for Retribution Paladin. We've had one significant change, so I'm going to go through that today. If this video has been out a week or so and you're not sure if it's the most up-to-date version, there's an annotation up there where you can click on the playlist. You'll be able to see which is the most up-to-date one. Of course, the bigger numbers means the more recent ones. So let's start out with the new change itself. Now, Sanctified Wrath has been added in. So we've had another level 100 talent disappear. In this case, it's Holy Wrath, and be replaced with a talent that, or the name of which at least exists in the current live version of the game that people have asked for. This time it's Sanctified Wrath. It's not quite the same, of course. Now, Avenging Wrath, the normal version, does 35% extra damage for 20 seconds. What the new version does is 5%, but it also increases your haste by 5%. But that's not where it ends. All the holy power you spend, every point of holy power you spend during that window increases it by another 5%, stacking up to 15 times. So obviously when you're using this version, you ideally want to stack up as much as possible. So it goes without saying, what you're going to want to do is have 5 holy power ready. Make sure your judgment ready. Make sure your Wake of Ashes is ready, because what you want to do, of course, is judge then into your Sanctified Wrath. You want to then use your holy power spenders as quickly as possible. Once you've spent those, use Wake of Ashes, use more holy power spenders as quickly as possible. Not only is that going to do more damage anyway while you're under the effects of Avenging Wrath, but of course it's going to stack up that buff and the haste buff, which of course means you can have Judgment off cooldown coming more quickly as well. So it sounds really interesting. The only drawback potentially, and this is potential, it depends on where you stand in terms of the new rotation style. Now, I did a video a bit ago talking about the fact that there is some delay. There's sometimes when you've got abilities you could use, but you're just going to hold off with the new version. Simply because you've maybe got your full holy power, but you're waiting for judgment to come off cooldown or for a suitable time to use it. Some people don't like that. They like the more rapid fire where there's the ability to use, which there is most of the time in live, then you're using it. The Sanctified Wrath, of course, might mean an extra little delay. I don't think we're ever going to be stood around doing nothing for any significant amount of time. But of course, remember what we need for the Sanctified Wrath. Before we use it, we must have full holy power. We must have Wake of Ashes ready. So sometimes we'll be holding off on using those in the lead up to when we know. And of course, it means we need to plan very carefully when we're going to use these. So we're mostly talking about organised PvE here. If you're using it on the fly, then you just have to make the best of it. Now, the other thing to note is I don't at the moment know, and there's no point in working it out because things will change. I don't know whether it would be better to use your full 5 holy power on, say, a Justicar's Vengeance in one fell swoop, then Wake of Ashes, then another one. That way we could get up to 10 stacks in like 2 globals, basically. Whether that is better than just spending them and taking a little bit longer on the Templar's Verdicts, which will do more damage. This is especially true this build because Templar's Verdict has been buffed, great, but Justicar's Vengeance has not. So the increased damage between Justicar's Vengeance and Templar's Verdict is not as great. The other thing to note is that our artifacts have traits that increase the duration of Avenging Wrath. This is only going to make this particular talent even more powerful. So before I get on to looking at some of the gameplay, there's a Dungeon Blackrook hold where I had a lot of fun, and of course it was a full dungeon, so that's always good. I want to talk about some of the talents I haven't talked about for a while. The main reason for that is because I haven't really been using them. I just want to go through the reasons for that. Not all of them are bad. The first one in the first row is Consecration. Now, I haven't really mentioned Consecration either good or bad. The simple reason being that I don't think it's useful. It's not going to be a suitable spell. And the reason for that is because it does constant AoE. But in fights, you don't get constant AoE. Even on fights where there's a lot of adds, it's not constant AoE. You've got single target periods of those fights, and then adds come in, and then you want some AoE. Now, what's better in a situation like that is an ability that has a cooldown, that does a lot of AoE while it's up, but has a cooldown. Of course, Blade Storm being the obvious example, but we've got one as well in the current live version, which is Light's Hammer. This would be a lot better because the thing is that the Consecration and similar abilities are tuned around the fact that they're going to be doing damage all the time, but they're only going to be doing damage to one mob while you're just on a boss. It's only going to be doing its extra damage in an AoE situation. And it shares, it competes with the talent Final Verdict, which is useful in single target and AoE. And that is something that is useful in both phases, where Consecration is only useful in one. So why haven't I moaned about this? The reason is simple. I absolutely can't moan about this because so many people for so many years, ever since MOP started, have said that they want Consecration back for Retribution Paladins. Personally, I don't know why. It was always a pain in the arse to fit it into the rotation before. It didn't make a great deal of sense. Yes, it's an iconic ability, but is it an effective ability for us? Does it make a lot of sense? For me, no, it doesn't. Not at all. Much better for protection, in fact. In the second row, Zeal is one I haven't talked about and certainly haven't used a lot much, and the reason for that is simply that it is just weak. It's a nice enough thing in theory, you know, you build up this buff as long as you're using it. That buff would be ready for you when ads spawn in because you're building up the buff just by using it, even in single target. So you'd then be able to instantly cleave with that ability when the ads spawned in. The two major problems with this is, one, that Crusader Strike does not do a great deal of damage. Now, of course, we don't know how things are going to be finally tuned, but you've got to imagine it's still not going to do very much damage even when this goes live because it's a holy power builder. It's no good if that does a lot of damage because otherwise why would we bother spending, even with the new mastery? So the fact that Crusader Strike doesn't do that much damage means that cleaving it onto other ads isn't going to do that much extra damage. And it's in direct competition with Greater Judgment. And for all the issues that there are with Greater Judgment and for the fact that it does not always allow us to use our mastery in AoE, unlike as stated by the developers, as I've been through before, you can watch more recent videos and I explain that again. The fact is, it does sometimes allow you to use your mastery in AoE, and that makes it infinitely more powerful than Zeal. So, you know, you would only use Zeal in an AoE situation, but in an AoE situation, you would use Greater Judgment. And that's all there is to it. So it competes with something that is used in the same situation and is better. In terms of the third tier of talent, of course, there are crowd control ones. We very rarely get to use crowd control. Where we do, a stun is obviously the best. And being able to reduce the cooldown of that by spending holy power is likely to be more useful. It's not that repentance is necessarily going to be useless. It may come in useful at certain times in niche situations. There's nothing particularly wrong with that ability. Blinding Light, I think there is something fundamentally wrong with it. It's just basically pants. But again, I'm not going to moan too much about the crowd control thing because in a lot of situations, okay, dungeons, and yeah, dungeons are going to be a much bigger part of Legion for all players, no matter how high up you're playing. They're going to be a bigger thing. So perhaps, you know, crowd control is more of a feature, but the good old Hammer of Justice and a shorter cooldown on it, I still think is going to be, in most situations, better, because for all the added difficulty of the dungeons, with challenge mode being introduced in MOP, and the way the Mythic Plus is going to work in Legion, are we ever going to go back to the days where people pull mobs back and we crowd control one or two of them and take on a few at a time and nibble? Probably not, because we're up against the clock, and that's the big difference, I feel. Although you still get situations when I'm doing these dungeons, these are just heroics sometimes, where the tank rushes in and I think to myself, well, you could just pull that back and then we wouldn't get the ads coming in, and some of them are actually quite nasty. But that's just how people are now. That's how it's done. And when in the old days, you were up against a clock. In fact, you knew the dungeon was going to take a long time. So what does it matter if you're going to take a little bit longer on crowd control and a couple of mobs? So I still think Fist of Justice is going to be the way to go. In terms of the fourth tier, these are our Blade of Justice modifiers. It's the only tier of talents left that modifies, where they all modify one of our core abilities. I missed it in the original versions, I have to say. And they're all decent in their own situations. They are all good. The one that I tend not to use as much now is Divine Hammers. It's not because it's not good. There's two reasons for that. One is that when I'm doing these dungeons, what I'm consciously trying to do is work out which set of talents can you use that you do not change all the way through it. And that's quite important because, one, just in dungeons in general, you don't want to be changing talents all the time because people pull quite quickly. Again, especially when you're doing the Mythic Plus, we're going to be up against the clock. So if you can have one set of talents that's just good for bosses and good for trash, all to the better. The other thing is that when you change talents, you lose your greater blessings. So any greater blessings on yourself get lost. The same applies to anyone else. So you're constantly having to check other people out to make sure that the people that you've blessed, to make sure they haven't changed talents and lost it. Really annoying when they do it literally a second before a pull because you might not even notice. So I think we're going to have to track those. But that's a side issue. Divine Hammers does very good damage. But the other reason is not only, because it's not going to be useful on a boss. The other reason is it only generates one holy power. And that sort of messes with my brain, quite frankly. The fact that Blade of Justice does 2 holy power and then I switch to that particular talent and it's only doing 1. And it screws me about. So where it's going to be the obvious choice to take, I will of course take it, but it's going to have to be the obvious choice before I do take it. And in dungeons, I mean, trash, yeah, sure, but you won't be using holy power spenders as much. But on bosses, not so much, even with ads, unless there's ads light up all the time, not so much. In terms of the 5th tier, I'm almost exclusively using Justicar's Vengeance. In terms of the other two, Eye for an Eye is just one of those, it might have some niche ability. There might be a fight where it could be useful for a particular mechanic. It is what it is. But generally speaking, it's not going to be used very much. But I'm not going to say it's a terrible talent. I still think it's one of those that would probably be better as a PvP talent, really. But yeah, you can't deny the fact there might be a fight somewhere where we can use it. Word of Glory, I do have an issue with. I'm not going to say I would never use it. I'm not going to say it's bad. It's just that because there's several problems with it. One is it uses 3 holy power and it has a cooldown on it, a 1 minute cooldown. Yes, you get 2 charges, fine. Now, for my money, it should probably just have one of these restrictions. Either make it cost holy power, because then you're losing DPS by using it anyway. And let's be honest, you're not doing the same healing as an actual healer when you're using this thing. So there's a drawback there just for using it. Or have the 1 minute cooldown with the 2 charges, but not cost holy power. I mean, to have both seems like overkill to me. The other problem with it is that it is quite short range and it is centered on the paladin. So it is only any use when you've got a number of people grouped on you, which, yes, okay, we're melee, so that happens in raids. And they've taken a lot of damage. Because you're not going to use it just to top people up, are you, when they're on like 80% health? Not that it would top them up if they're on 80% health, it doesn't do that much healing. But you're not going to use it in that situation because it's on DPS loss and the healers are on top of it. You're only going to use it in an emergency situation. So you have to know that those emergency situations exist. Now, when they exist on a raid, you're not going to... Again, you could say to yourself, okay, it might be quite useful. Maybe it will. But then you think to yourself this, how useful is it actually going to be when not even all guilds have a Retribution Paladin? Surely there are going to... And even though there are fewer cooldowns, there are still defensive cooldowns that can be used in predictable high periods of damage in a fight. So... And just this fact that it's centered on the Paladin, if you could place it a bit like a Priest Barrier, that might be better. I think that would be better because you still have the option of placing it on yourself. But those are my 2 great gripes with it. But it doesn't mean to say I won't use it. If there is a fight where it looks like it could get us past a particular phase where the healing is a real struggle, absolutely. I just don't think it's going to see much use. Dungeons is one place where, again, it might. But again, if people are spreading out, not that useful. But I certainly see it having more use in dungeons. On the 6th tier is our defensive stroke movements one. Of course, I've griped enough about the fact we have no baseline movement when every other melee does. Divine Intervention is really, really nice. It not only halves the cooldown on our Divine Shield, which actually I think is a bit of an anachronism now, when there's a lot of classes, by no means all, but there are a lot of classes that have extremely powerful defensives, even immunities, that are on a significantly shorter cooldown. That for us to have Divine Shield still on a 5-minute base cooldown seems excessive. So the Divine Intervention is very attractive from that point of view. The fact that Divine Shield now allows us to do damage without having our damage halved, as it does in live, is also a big bonus, but that's a baseline feature. And then the cheat death mechanic. The cheat death mechanic is potentially really nice, because sometimes you get a situation where you think, oh, I'm getting low on health, shall I bubble, shall I bubble? And you're not sure. It's like, you're thinking yourself like a healer. I mean, what healers, of course, thinking when they see people on low health, who to triage, who to heal first. It's basically a case of, okay, how likely are each of those to take damage in the next few seconds? And you having to think that yourself. It's like being on low health, well, you're not dead, it's not a big problem. Unless, of course, you're going to take some more damage in the next few seconds. So you're always sort of making that judgment. And if you use it, then you can't use it again, on its baseline ability for 5 more minutes. Whereas with this one, you don't have to make that decision. You can just think to yourself, okay, well, if I'm on low health anyway, if the cheat death mechanic triggers, it's going to put me onto 20% health. I'm already on really that low anyway. I'm not giving the healers any harder a time. I'll just leave it. And if I happen to die, then it'll just trigger. Great, fantastic. So it's a really nice talent. So opposite that, we have the movement ones. Divine Steed. My issue with Divine Steed is mainly that it is too short a duration. It now does work. We can use it indoors in dungeons, but it's too short. I would have the speed bonus reduced. To my mind, it should be at least as good as Speed of Light in live now. Given that we are using a talent point on. If it was a baseline ability, I would go, sure, whatever. 100% for 3 seconds, yeah, okay. But with it costing a talent, and with it costing a talent in a row where there is a talent that is really nice, especially for progress, I want to think to myself, I need this to have a longer duration. Because you can lose a certain amount. I mean, first of all, to use it properly, you're going to have to already start moving and then use it so that you don't waste even a millisecond, or, more realistically, hundreds of milliseconds, your own reaction time. 3 seconds, and it, just knock it down to 70% for like 7 or 8 seconds or something. That's what I would say for that. Seal of Light is a funny one. I think I am better inclined towards it than I think a lot of people are. The fact that it costs holy power is a bit of an issue. What is a bigger issue for me is that it has this thing where it costs between 1 and 5 holy power. It'll basically just use up all your holy power. If you have 1 holy power, it'll use that. If you have 5, it'll use that. It gives you the same speed increase, 20%, but it just increases the duration. Now, at 1 holy power, it gives you 20 seconds of this. I'm okay with 20 seconds of the speed increase. I don't need the speed increase all the time. I would actually be quite positive about this talent, as positive as I can be. Again, the fact that it's competing with a defensive talent, but okay. There's worse things it could compete with. I would be much happier if it just cost 1 holy power. If 20 seconds later I still want that speed boost, I can use it again. But don't make it use up all my holy power if I've got a lot banked up when I want to use it. And in terms of managing it so that we only use it for the minimum amount of time, and you could all say, well, you just have to plan. I mean, with PvE events like raids and things like that, you sort of know when you're going to need it a little bit. You've got timers. Sure, but there's a lot of things we've got to build in already. We're already going to be having to plan for when we've got our judgment window up, and it's going to be quite frequent, especially as we get more haste anyway. We're already going to have to plan if we take the Sanctified Wrath talent. We're already going to have to plan when ads are about to spawn in to, again, make best use of our mastery. There's lots of things we'll have to plan for already. We don't really need to be adding this in as well. So my recommendation for this Seal of Light talent would be just have it cost 1 holy power, 20 seconds, 20%, great. Keep it. I would probably use it then in dungeons. I think I would actually probably use it. In terms of the final tier, last week, Blessings of Justice went. It was replaced with Divine Purpose. with their plans for the greater blessings that they announced last week, that was an obvious thing, or the week before, sorry. That was an obvious thing to get rid of. Also, people, again, had been asking for divine purpose, so it made sense to introduce that. I've been using that quite a lot. I quite like divine purpose. It's a nice one to use. Fair amount of flexibility in it as well. The main problem with it is in some situations deciding whether to use it on Justicar's Vengeance if you take that talent, or whether to use it in Divine Storm. It's not always obvious. But again, that's just something we'll work out. Now we've had Holy Wrath removed, and of course, I was finding some good use for it in solo situations. But a lot of people said it's not really a Retribution Paladin type ability. Much more suitable for Holy Paladins, people have noted, and it probably is. It just didn't quite fit. So we've now got Sanctified Wrath, which again I think people will be very positive about. I haven't. Not necessarily everyone has posted their feedback on this yet, but I think people will be positive. I haven't used it that much yet because it's going to take more maintenance to use this properly. In a dungeon situation, I don't know. Because it's one of those things you need to use, because it's now going to directly affect your Avenging Wrath. To get the best use out of it, you need to be using Avenging Wrath fairly frequently. I tend not to use that on Trash so much. Especially as well because I don't yet know the dungeons very well, and you don't really want to use it on the trash pack before a boss accidentally. But for raids, certainly I think it's got to be said, once we get the duration of Avenging Wrath increasing, because we can spend up to 3 artifact trait points increasing the duration of Avenging Wrath, and with the relics that you get don't just increase the item level of your weapon. They always have an increase to a rank on one of the particular traits. Now, of course, if we look out and get some relics, potentially 3 relics, that all have the Avenging Wrath trait rank on it, blimey, we'll absolutely be using that talent. But even one relic to get up to the 4, and that'll get us up to about an extra 50% usage on it. It's got to be a good one. It's got to be good on a raid boss. And then the final one that's still there is Equality. Again, we might get some niche use on it, but it's such a crap ability. Everyone has sort of poo-pooed this, but Blizzard, it's one of the abilities like, because you might think to yourself, okay, well, they got rid of a talent that people weren't too keen on last build. They've got rid of a talent people weren't too keen on this build. There's only one left in that 100 thing. Maybe they'll get rid of it next build. I wouldn't hold your breath because the thing about the other 2 talents is Blizzard had not defended them. They have defended Equality. I think when they've gone out of their way to defend some aspect of the Retribution playstyle or toolkit, same probably applies to any other class, come to mention it, I think they're probably going to keep it. That at most they will tweak it, if that. So when it comes to things that they're not actively defending, maybe they will change it, but I think any features that they have defended very strongly are probably set in stone. There is one thing to be said for Equality now, though, in that there was a restriction on it before that meant if you had Forbearance active, you could not use it. What that basically meant was if you were thinking of using it with Divine Intervention, whereby you basically overdo it, Divine Intervention procs, you get bunged up to 20% health, but then you can still use Equality quick before the healers heal you up. Couldn't happen. Now it can. They've removed that restriction, so you absolutely can use it together now. You can proc the cheat death. Also, if you look at the reduction here, I mean, you've Divine Shield with Divine Intervention. You can be used every 2.5 minutes, and therefore so can the cheat death. Equality has a 3-minute cooldown. So every time Equality is ready, you can basically just try and suicide, get yourself to 20% health, use Equality really quickly, and you could be using it effectively on cooldown, which is the only way surely to get decent damage out of it. Now, things to note though, it's not as glorious as it sounds. One, I think Blizzard have said that there's not going to be any damage multipliers on it. So you're not going to benefit from any damage buffs or anything like that for it. It will just literally do 1.5 times the amount of health you've lost. Other downside is I keep talking about quick before the healers heal you up. Well, there is the issue, isn't it? Healers like to heal people. Sort of their role. So, and it's not reasonable to expect a healer to know when you're deliberately suiciding. I don't think you should be shouting things like that out all the time. And the other thing is there needs to be something every 3 minutes on which you can suicide effectively. You know, you don't want to just be... I mean, the easy thing would be to taunt the boss, let the boss smack you, and then use a quality after it. I'm not sure what the actual tanks are going to think to that sort of behaviour. So, just from that point of view, it's still not a good talent. It's just that now you could probably use it without necessarily risking too much if you took it with Divine Intervention, and Divine Intervention is a really good talent anyway. Okay, so I went to Blackrook Hold. It was I tried a few dungeons this weekend, and this was the only one where not only did I get to do a full run right from start to finish and no one left, and it was all great. It's actually a really nice dungeon. I really like this now. The last time I got to do this, we had to stop halfway through the third boss because the servers were going down. But yeah, I managed to get a full run now. I'm not using Sanctified Wrath. There's bugs in this build at the moment, and you'll notice that debuffs, like when I put Judgment there, debuffs are not showing on the target UI. They're sort of appearing on the bars, but you can see the bars quite high up. I've got something on Tell Me When that lets me know when my target has got Judgment on it, which is absolutely necessary. I'd have to create similar things for Sanctified Wrath as well, and Execution Sentence if I was going to use those two. But as I say, the purpose of this is, what I'm still trying to test is, can I have a set of talents that will do me for all parts of a dungeon? And I think the answer is yes. I was reasonably pleased with it. I think the only fight I didn't do very well on was one where I was constantly moving out as well. I don't know these fights terribly well yet. Sometimes I might have been moving out correctly, or maybe others weren't, or maybe I wasn't moving out correctly. I was staying out too long. I don't know. Now, I'm not saying it wouldn't have been useful to change a few talents. Of course, on a fight like this, Greater Judgment is of no use whatsoever. I'd be far better off using, say, Fires of Justice or something like that. Execution Sentence would be good, although as there seems to be ads in here, I'm assuming we're supposed to kill these as they're going. But again, I know nothing about this fight on Heroic. But usually it's a fair bet. Ads move slowly towards the boss. It's probably not good that they reach the boss. And but again, just managing this Judgment debuff. Because you don't want to just put it on an ad unless it's really close to the boss, because you know that the ad's going to get blown up really quickly and then you're losing it. And that's just my main gripe with this Judgment debuff. But yeah, I would, you know, on a fight like this, I probably wouldn't have taken Greater Judgment, because even though there are ads, and you'd probably want to blow them up before they get close to the boss anyway. And I probably would have taken Execution Sentence if I was just fully focused on this boss. But again, then you're changing your talents just before the pull. You're hoping that the tank doesn't pull too quickly. But again, you know, if you're in Heroic, it's probably the case, not necessarily, but it's probably the case you're in a pug, and they might not stop for you. And if you're not, if you're in Mythic Plus, well, you're against the clock. So you want to change talents as little as possible. And also remember that your Greater Blessing will fade from you when you change talents, if you're going to put it on yourself. And, you know, they haven't done this yet, but they are saying that they may well change it so that you can't apply it in combat. They seem... I'm not saying that they're absolutely certain on that, but they certainly seem to be considering that very, very seriously. That means that as soon as it's pulled, if you don't have it on yourself, we ain't going to get it on yourself. Now, in terms of this, I mean, this is the boss that I didn't do particularly well on. There's quite a lot of things. I mean, I've got DBM now, so I get a few little warnings about things, so even if I don't know about the abilities. So with the Throw Glaive thing, it says go away. I'm not convinced I needed to be away for that long, actually. Dark Rush is the one where we're all supposed to group up, so we get a small pool of fire. Oh, they're doing it there. And the fire doesn't seem to hurt that much. Whereas on the other one, it was just people were just spread out, and then the fire was going everywhere. But again, when you've got the Divine Purpose proc in there, again, I use Divine Purpose on all of these. It's really good, and it's good on Trash and Boss. And I probably would use this all the way through a dungeon, even if I'd changed other talents. I think, just because like in live, if you want to change a talent that's based on an ability that's on cooldown, you can't change it. So if I had Avenging Wrath on cooldown on live, I wouldn't be able to change away from the Sanctified Wrath talent. In here, I actually tried it. You actually can. It seemed quite happy for you to do that. And even out of combat, it even reset the cooldown. But I think that would change because you could sort of abuse all sorts of things in a dungeon by doing that. I think the aim with when you're getting the fire on yourself like this is to move it around in small areas, so you're leaving the other people with some space, but still remain in combat yourselves, close combat, so you can actually still be doing damage. I think that's the main thing there, and perhaps other players need to be alive to that too. I was stopped on when I was first doing this dungeon, or at least this boss, because the servers went down. It's a nice straightforward single target boss. Occasionally he knocks you back, occasionally he runs around or charges off some distance. It's never a particularly large distance. I don't think there's massive need for a movement speed. Again though, if Seal of Light, because there's not a massive need for Divine Intervention either, so if Seal of Light did cost 1 Holy Power, I would absolutely take it for this fight. A nice 20% increased speed would be quite nice. I don't even know what that box is for. I imagine that's some important mechanic that I'm completely oblivious to. I think it's just where he's going to do his charge. Is it like an order of things? I'm not sure what's got all our names on. Don't care. I'll read it up later. And again, it's just one of these. If you were going to change your talents before the fight and you were sure you were going to be able to get them changed and your blessings back on before the pull, then you would use your execution sentence, use Fires of Justice. I think I would probably use Sanctified Wrath as well. Using execution sentence with Sanctified Wrath, of course, much more careful planning required, because you want to ideally get 2 execution sentences hitting during the duration of the event, the Sanctified Wrath, which without any skills on the traits for that would be probably too difficult to realistically do. You could almost do it mathematically, but with a few skills on it, so you've got Avenging Wrath up to at least say 25 seconds, then absolutely you could do that. If you use execution sentence, let it fall for a few seconds, then use your judgment, and then use your Avenging Wrath or Sanctified Wrath, and then into it. You could actually do quite a lot of damage in that window then. On to the final boss. To begin with, it looked like quite straightforward. You know something's coming here. I had no idea what's going on in this fight. It's like, well, this guy's dying really quickly. It's the last boss. Something's going to happen. What's going to happen? And yeah, Avenging Wrath here. My second Avenging Wrath was less useful. I mean, at the moment, it looks really straightforward. I didn't even have to waste the Avenging Wrath at that point. And then you're going, okay, here it comes. What is it? Oh, okay, it's another proper boss. But other than that, it is still single target here. But yeah, taking a load of damage from something. Don't know what that is. Need to learn these fights. I need to actually, before it goes live, as I've said, not really massive need to learn now. You can just learn on the job, because they could change a load of abilities anyway, couldn't they? But again, just moving out there. I don't know what that was for. But it's just, I mean, you can see here, because of this rotation, moving back out with that swarm thing, he said. Not hugely sure what to do on that. And then the boss disappears, and you've just got to move around these things. But avoiding, which I didn't do very well, the green patches, because they put you to sleep. I think someone saved me on one of them, so I think it must be dispellable. But not so much on the other one. But yeah, you can see the rotation. It's just a standard rotation here. I'm building Holy Power using Judgment, spending Holy Power. Judgment weighs off. Sometimes you try and get off a sneaky Holy Power spender at the end of the window, and sometimes it misses. It's probably, to be fair, still worth doing it, because you'll be able to build up your Holy Power again before your Judgment come off cooldown in most cases. But I mean, this is what it's about. It's just a try and make sure you've got at least 2 spenders to use during the window. It's sometimes very difficult to get 3 off. If you get a Divine Purpose proc, then yeah, sure, like there. And remember to use that on Justicar's Vengeance, which is really nice because it does a little heal as well. It's just that in this build, they buffed Templar's Verdict, a few other things as well, but they didn't buff Justicar's Vengeance. So although Justicar's Vengeance still... There you go, I've just clipped it there. But someone saved me, thank you very much. Because Justicar's Vengeance hasn't been buffed, it doesn't do as much, you know, the difference in damage isn't as great. I'm not sure it necessarily changes the behaviour too much, because on a Divine Purpose proc, still use it on single target, because it's still more damage than Templar's Verdict, and it's free. Even with Final Verdict active, it's still a little bit more damage, not a great deal. And against a stunned mob, I mean, of course, it still does massive amounts more damage. It's just that in certain situations where you might want to use it just to actually heal yourself, as I did a few times on this fight, you are losing more damage by doing it. It's more of a cost. Now, it might be intended. That actually might be intended. I don't know. Be interesting to get a response from Blizzard on. Oh, dear. Gone the wrong way now. I'm constantly behind. Again, this is where Sea Level... I've run straight into that thing because I'm rushing. I'm not paying attention. So... I'll just bubble there, I think. So Shield of Vengeance type bubble. But, yeah. I've got logs for this, of course. You can see logs in the comments below for this particular one. If you click onto the same date, you'll also see some other logs for Court of Stars. Didn't do so well in there, but you're welcome to have a look at those as well if you want. And the final thing they've introduced this build is legendaries. We can get these off the vendor. So I've got a big bag of legendaries, which I'm going to be testing out a bit later. I've not been using them so far, of course. And I want to test their interaction with a few other abilities. So I'm going to be doing that this weekend, and I'll probably get that video out on Monday, so watch out for that. And in the meantime, if you found this video useful, as always, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. If you know anyone who might be interested, share it with them. And until next time, I'll see you later.